Hello, listeners. This is Zarinka, and you are listening to Breakfast with the Banker.
Hey, it's Zarinka, your friendly neighborhood business banker, coming to you live from Calgary, Alberta. And I want to know, are you the rock star of your company? Are you the Tiger Woods? Do you think you're the shiznizzle dizzle? And that might be an important thing to unpack, because even if you think you're a solo artist, you ain't doing it alone. Today with me, I have my good friend Andrew Shorter. He's a qualified business intermediary, seasoned entrepreneur, and deal maker whose career spans over 25 years in commercial real estate, banking, finance, insurance, and wealth management across the globe. I'm surprised we don't have juggling and barista. Like, what else have you done in your life? He helps business owners navigate their way through complexities of deciding whether to stay and grow or sell and go, ensuring that his clients can exit successfully on their own terms while maximizing their return on investment. So folks, if you hadn't figured it out, we're talking about selling your business and what that looks like. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Zarinka. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
I'm so happy too. So there are so many reasons to get your business prepared for a potential sale now instead of when you're truly over and done with it. So let's talk about that. Preparing your business for sale is like getting your home ready for sale. There's so many things that have to happen, except they can't happen the week before. So tell me a little bit about what that preparation looks like and maybe when people should really start.
Really great questions, Zarinka. You know, we talk to business owners all the time. There are different stages in their business cycles. They may be early on in the process. They've just started the business, maybe in the last few years, or they might be 10, 20 or more years, 25, 30 years in sometimes, and the business is their baby, but they really need to surround themselves with a great team and get prepared to exit. I think a lot of people come into a business or start a business, maybe even acquire a business, and they're not quite sure how they're going to exit or what the plan is down the track, or whether it's 5 or 10 years or whatever the time frame might be. So I think getting prepared and starting that process early on is really important, Zarinka. And I know from a banking perspective, in terms of being able to line up financing and things like that, you know, obviously the bankers are always looking at the financials, and that's important to have that aspect of the business in order. So, you know, having a great accounting team on board and legal advice and financial advice as well is really important.
This is accurate. We look at financials at least 3 years back to see how the company's doing, if not further. Even if you don't think you're going to sell right away, what if someone did come and say, hey, I'm offering you this much money? And then all of a sudden they do their due diligence and you're like, oh no, I am my company. I can't get out of this without doing a lot of work now. So we talked about automation on the last podcast episode, and obviously I think that's a really important thing, not just in terms of technology, but making sure that your business can run without you. What kind of advice do you give your clients in order to sort of build that so they can take a step back?
And I think, you know, having the right systems, processes, and people in place is really important. So I think systems, you talk about, you know, whether it's your IT systems or upgrading, streamlining in this day and age. So being able to integrate that into the business is a big thing, as well as having, you know, the right people, the right team in place. I talk a little bit about, you know, what if you get, I hate to use the analogy, what if the owner of the business gets hit by a bus? You know, we hate to think about it, but if the owner wasn't there tomorrow, would that business still be able to operate? Because often they have a very key role in the process. But, you know, I got a friend who I know plays a lot of golf, has a very good business, and I said to him, he's playing 100 rounds of golf a year, and I said, how do you do that? Because I've got a really great team in place. The business runs itself. So I'm like, you've got a really good business and it's valuable, but there's other folks out there who are more in the scrambling mode, that they're just trying to pull everything together, you know, trying to make sure you've got cash flow and sales on the board to be able to keep the lights on and pay your people and so on. I said to people, if you're not there, can the business still operate and be sustainable without you? If the answer is yes, and you can go away and take a vacation for 6 months, you got a really good business. But if you have to work 70 or 80 hours a week in the business to make the wheels turn and develop the revenue and cash flow, then that's more of a challenge, I would say.
Business transition isn't always in the case of buying and selling, sometimes it happens when we don't mean for it to happen, whether someone falls ill or there has been conflict within the business ownership group. Transitions can happen for many, many reasons. So being prepared ahead of time is always good because it's not just when you decide to retire.
Totally.
That's one of the many scenarios of business transition. So one of the things when you talked about prepared and business can sustain itself without you, so that means that there's a value there. So if you are scrambling, spending 70 hours a week in your company to just make things work, and you're literally holding everything together yourself as a business owner versus the opposite, how does that translate into the value of your company when you go to sell?
Absolutely, Zarinka. Yeah, I think, being prepared and being well organized. Life happens, they say, and whether that could be health issues, could be sometimes, unfortunately, a death. I've seen a business partner in a business where there were two partners. One of the partners passed away and he hadn't renewed the insurance. And so it ended up being a really challenging situation. It was a downturn in the market. So the remaining partner had to buy out the shares of the estate. So just having those things in place and being ready for the unexpected. I hate to say hit by a bus, but death, divorce, and disability can happen. And to your point, if the business owner has all those processes and people and systems in place and they're ready, that value of that business is going to be way higher than the business that isn't as set up or streamlined.
So all things equal, depending on how you're running it, can really be a detriment to everything you've built at the end of the day, if you're selling because you want to or if you're selling because you have to. And nobody likes to leave cash on the table, especially if you've been in the business and you've built it for 25 years. That is blood, sweat, tears, and all the things. So going back to our analogy of, are you the rock star? Are you the Tiger Woods? You might be a solo entrepreneur. Maybe you have a business partner or multiple, but you don't do it alone. Those solo athletes and rock stars have producers and managers and all these people behind them that make them great and let them do what they are good at doing. So in terms of creating the dream team that supports you, you're a physiotherapist and all the other wonderful things, because that actually could be part of your dream team as a business owner. But what do you think are some important key things to look for when building that dream team around you in preparedness for transition?
I look at it a little bit like you can only do so much. There's certain areas I'm strong in the business and operations. Business development, marketing is a strength of mine, but I'm not as great on the administration side. So I'm better to have somebody take care of some of those things for me, and outsource what you're not good at or what you're not maybe strong. And the likes of your analogy is great with if you've got a sports star and you've got a trainer, you've got a coach, a trainer, a physio, probably a masseuse if you're a top athlete, all those types of things. And so you can then go out there and focus on whether it's hitting the tennis ball or the golf ball or whatever the case might be. You can then focus on what you're really good at and you don't have distractions around you. And I think we can all get easily distracted, and with a lot of small businesses, that's the case where people they're running on the treadmill every day and they don't have a lot of time to just take a step back, take a breath, and just look at everything from a 30,000 foot perspective on more of a strategic level. If you're looking to sell your business, or even acquire a business, I think having a really good tax and accounting team, legal is really important. If you've got a financial advisor or planner, that's really important too. A business broker on your team is important. I'm not sure if I left anybody else out, but probably a banker would be an important. Hey. Probably a banker would be an important one, Zarinka. My apologies. I should have said that first.
I think it was just implied.
Absolutely.
So one of the things you said is obviously an accountant, and one of the things that you and I talked about is normalizing financial statements and what that means. And this doesn't matter what size you are. And I really want to touch on this because I think this is really important. Can you explain to the wonderful people listening, what does it actually mean when we talk about normalizing financials?
So what happens is when usually a small business owner, we're not talking about large public companies and so on, that's a little different, but in the small to medium business market, I think a lot of business owners, or the majority of business owners will write off a lot of expenses through the company. They may be one-offs, which could be legal fees that they've incurred in the financial year, or one of the family members might be driving a company vehicle or something like that. And so, what we call something you would add back onto the bottom line. So, for example, if the owner's taking a $100,000 salary from the business, we then add back some of those one-off, what we call non-operational expenses that a new owner wouldn't necessarily incur. And then that will, instead of being profit of maybe $100,000, it could be $250,000. I won't get into the valuation side of it because that's a whole other story. That's probably a conversation for another day. But that's kind of how it works.
So essentially, making sure that the expenses and everything in the business is truly specific to the operations of the business, not this extra discretionary spending that might have gotten added in via extra expenses for kids' cars, cell phones, family cell phone.
Could be a boat or a trip to Vegas or something. But
Sure.
Some of that's personal, some is business related.
So it's making sure that those numbers are clean years before, so that what a prospective buyer is looking at really is a true representation of the company. It's no different than if you're buying a house, you want to show that you make more, but if you want to pay less taxes, you want to show that you make less.
I think just to add to that, Zorinka, most people's accountants do a really good job at minimising their taxes and they write off whatever you can within CRA's guidelines, right? I know most people don't want to be paying more tax than what they have to. And, if you've got a really good accountant, they can figure out some stuff that most people, probably the average person, may not know about. Or maybe they've worked for CRA as well, so they know all the tricks.
I assume that this is a big conversation. Your legal professional needs to be someone who is well versed in the subject, truly a corporate lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we talked earlier about the scenario in which the transition happens when something happens to one of the shareholders, whether it's something dire or it's just truly a product of disagreement. And I know that we always say make sure to have a shareholder agreement in place. Can you tell me and our listeners a little bit more?
Sort of go back to my insurance background. Working with business owners, often there's a shareholder agreement in place, or there may not be. The 50% of the time, there may not be nothing in place. And so, that could have been done 10 years ago, right? And so it hasn't been updated, or things have changed. The business evolves, a lot changes, and what the business value was 10 years ago or more is probably going to be very different to what it is today. So let's say there's more than one partner or owner of the company involved, then there's a problem if it's not funded. So how do you fund that? There's experts in their field that can help to fund those shareholder agreements on the risk and insurance side of things. So you're right, though, if somebody suddenly gets taken out of the business for whatever reason, or maybe there's a disagreement, lots of scenarios can happen or eventuate. So it's important to have that shareholders agreement funded. When I talked earlier about that was a real life example where I knew two partners in a business and one had passed away. That was $500,000 that the remaining owner had to come up with to pay out the estate of the former business partner, which is a lot of it's a lot of money in anyone's terms. And so that was a number of years ago, but even today, that's, it's going to have a huge hit. They could put you right out of business, or you might have to sell your house and cash up and lots of things. Or just give up the company. Yeah. And that actually pretty much happened. They ended up selling the company for very little, unfortunately, in the market. There was a downturn in the market. So
it sounds like there is more that can go wrong if you're not prepared than can go right. So being prepared is in everybody's best interest, and the lawyers and the insurance people and the accountants will help, even if you're not going to, let's say, fully employ their services, but at least to give you an assessment at periods throughout the business lifetime to ensure that everything is in place, or at least so you know what could happen. And one of the other things we talked about earlier is making sure the right people are doing the right things for you. But we kind of talked about it from a place of automation and accounting and having that dream team around you. But one of the things we also talked about is the people in your business doing the right roles too, and having a really solid organizational chart. So Tell me one of the things that you would recommend when you're talking to clients about making sure the people in their business are organized properly.
It's huge, actually. I had a personal experience a number of years ago. I was involved in a company and nobody had job descriptions. You've got to have the right foundations in place, and it kind of relates to governance as well. With corporate governance is really important for your business. Some people, if they don't have a job description, then other people are tripping over each other. They don't know what's my role. What am I supposed to be doing? Like, what was I hired to do? And so you could end up in a situation where the accountant or the CFO is trying to do the marketing job. I've had first-hand experience of that. So it can be extremely frustrating, and it can distract the whole focus of the business.
Especially with a new person coming in, then how do you find your place in the ecosystem when the ecosystem doesn't even know its place? It's like the jungle has gone mad, and
right.
I'm sure there's a movie clip for that somewhere.
And to that point too, if the company's growing really quickly, which can be the case, and that was the case with the company I was involved in, the wheels are turning so fast, people don't have time. They're scrambling again. They don't have time to sit down. And there isn't a full-time HR person, and that's really important to make sure for any potential problems down the track, which can pop up as well. Having an employment agreement and things like that in place, and knowing exactly what your role is super important. But yeah, you'd be surprised at how many companies don't have that in place.
We're not saying it's not okay to wear many hats. It's just knowing which hats belong to you, and if there is a moment in which you must wear a couple more, there's always these extenuating circumstances. But as a normal day-to-day function, people should really know what they're coming in to do so that they can do their job effectively, efficiently. And so anyone stepping into that company to either walk through because they're going to buy or coming into it as the new owner has a larger chance of success. A lot of the times the success post-close is just as important as the success pre-close, as there generally are different tranches of payments and milestones that the company needs to reach, depending on how you structure your sale. But there's a million different ways to do it. So setting up for success isn't just beneficial to you before, it actually is good for you post-transition as well, to ensure that you get everything that you've earned out of the company. Now, I don't want to touch on this too long, but maybe just going over two different types of sales. Some people choose to sell as a share sale, and some people choose to sell as an asset sale. Do you have any thoughts about this topic? And why one or the other? Just briefly.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not a CPA, but I've got a pretty sound knowledge of the process and how it all works. In a nutshell, Zorinka, if you structure a share sale, what it does here in Canada is it enables you to take advantage of the one-time
capital gains exemption.
You got it. You hit the nail on the head. The one-time.
Again, teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. But it's just close to $1 million here in Canada. So if you're just selling the assets of the company, you aren't able to take advantage of that, and you can only use it once. But if you haven't taken advantage of that previously, that can be huge in terms of what the net proceeds will be upon the disposition or the sale of the business, because it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes you could be paying. So. Right, or more. It might be millions if it's a larger business.
Oh, jeez.
Right.
That sounds like zero fun.
Yeah, but in some cases, the buyer or the acquirer of the business will want an asset sale. It can be more advantageous from the buyer's perspective, but in many cases, it's more beneficial for the seller of the business that's divesting to set that or structure that as a share sale. My disclaimer there is always talk to your accountant and make sure you have a good accountant and on your dream team to do that. I'm not giving accounting advice today,
Nope.
But that is something I would highly recommend.
Well, this is why it's important, because if you just thought, I'm going to keep this company, I'm selling the forklift and we're done here, and then after the fact you find this out and you're like, oh shoot. So understanding everything ahead of time and long ahead of time is the best way to get all this money that you've essentially been saving and working towards this business asset.
Totally, and I think on that note too, Zorinka, a lot of business owners who again have good tax advice and so on. It's fairly typical to have a holdco, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, a holdco and an operating company.
One of the things I really want to stress is that the reason these experts are so important is because every situation is different. So you can't just go and Google and say, what's the best way to structure my company? Because your goals, your industry, your everything is unique to you. So why wouldn't you go get custom advice to ensure that you get the right advice?
100%. Absolutely.
Like, Google it, sure, so you can maybe have some questions, but then go seek out professional help. And I would highly recommend you talk to a couple people, because you also want to really enjoy the vibe of whoever you're working with, because these are going to be your people. So find the people you enjoy working with, that you trust, and that have obviously experience.
Yeah, and they've got your back. They've got your back.
Yeah.
You know, that's really important.
Oh, gosh. Tough go out there. Gotta find all your dream team now, folks. You have so much to do before the holidays and Christmas shopping and all the things. So I want to recap. We talked about the holdco opco, so structure outside of the business. We talked about the structure inside of the business. And now let's say all of that is wonderful and perfect, and you've done your homework, you have your dream team. But now that you've done all this and you go to actually decide to sell, that process is not quick. So maybe tell us what your experience is for the actual process when someone's ready to go and do that on their own accord.
Totally. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Zorinka, as well. Every business, every situation is different. So you can't say what applies for one business owner, their circumstances and personal situation and how they've structured just their life and you know, whether they're single or married or have kids. Everybody's situation is different. Some might take a year to sell, some might take a few months, or some might sell quite quickly, and other businesses could take 2 years or more, or you know, or they may not sell at all. It's not an exact science, but I think going back to the dream team and finding your accountant, somebody, you know, like myself, a business intermediary or a qualified business broker that can help guide you through that process early on and get things in place and ready. I come across a number of businesses that I'm considering selling or thinking about maybe a transition or exiting, and that could be 1, 2, 3 or more years away. But either the business is growing really fast, so they want to stay in and to maximize the growth and the value of the business, or they're in a situation where that maybe they have to sell for whatever reason, you know. So it can be a fairly lengthy process in some cases. So I think being prepared, if you're considering selling in 5 years, start getting things ready like today.
That's an interesting thing you just brought up, because it could take years to sell your company, and not because you haven't found the buyer, but maybe it's your key manager and they don't have $3 million today, but over the course of time, they can buy more and more of the company until you're ready to fully exit, and maybe some financing can come in or whatever. So you can actually start selling your company well in advance of your actual exit, which is probably preferred for a good transition, right? Is to have that time. I know in the banking system, even post close of the sale, we want to see that seller sticking around for a little bit to ensure that transition is successful, because we're betting that it is going to be successful.
Totally.
And also that seller has to be cognizant that people don't just have millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars laying around to do that transition and make it snap and quick. There has to be a vendor take-back portion, and a vendor take-back is when the seller self-finances a portion of that sale. So they'll say, hey, give me $1 million today, and you can pay the remaining 500 over the course of 5 years at X amount of interest, in order to help build in the equity portion of that company so that a bank can come in. Or maybe a bank doesn't have to come in because that's there. Now, you said sometimes businesses don't ever sell. That makes me sad.
It can happen for a number of different reasons.
I think that's a reality that people need to realize too, is that the perceived value is only there if someone's willing to buy it.
That's exactly right.
That's like a sad end to the story. I feel like we need a Disney ending now.
So during COVID, you saw some of the bars and restaurants. There was some in Calgary, and I've been around for many, many years, and they just closed the doors. Now, that's really sad if they've spent all those years building up that business and they've developed a loyal clientele, and then they have to close the doors for... They may not have had to have done that, but perhaps they weren't prepared for the change in the economic conditions as well, you know.
I guess that's maybe a cautionary tale to ensure that you don't just think someone's going to buy you out of the debt you've accumulated or whatever else in the... Like, there has to be some planning for whether there isn't a transition. Maybe your kids don't want to take it over because that's not their jive. So there are a ton of different ways it can shake out. And I guess the big thing is get the expert advice, find the dream team, pull yourself out of the company as much as you can so that it can run without you. And I guess final piece of advice?
I think we've covered a lot of ground, Zorinka,
Yeah.
but yeah, to take yourself out of the business I talk about. You know, if you don't have to be there, the business can run itself, then you've got to put everything in place to make that happen. And then there's going to be a much smoother transition when the next owner takes over the business, that's for sure.
And we know you, entrepreneur, that you can do it best. And it's hard to delegate. And putting those pieces in place takes a lot of work. But be humble. It's okay. These people can do this job too. And if you get the right people in there and give them their job descriptions and ensure the processes are in place, I mean, yeah, you could be in the company every day, and maybe you want to do that some days. But there could be a bunch of other places you could also be putting your time. And it's okay. It's okay to step away.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, this has been fun. Thank you so much for showing up today and chit-chatting with me and giving some good advice to our listeners out there and teaching them a little bit about the business sale process. I hope everyone out there has a wonderful day, and it looks like you all have some homework, so get to it.
Thanks for having me, Zorinka.
Awesome.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye, everyone.